I welcome everybody again to Conversations with Tim. I'm excited to be talking with Sam Lichtman today. He's the partner over at Wealth Management. You've been in the financial planning business for about 5 years, and in the middle of the pandemic, you decided to open your own company with a partner of yours. Can you just tell us a little bit about the financial planning industry and how everything came to be that you are now a partner at the Achieve Wealth Management company?
Yeah, thanks for having me on your podcast, Tim. It's awesome to be here. Yeah, it's been a crazy last year because everything just kind of felt like it happened all at once with the pandemic, and then ended up leaving a firm I'd been at for over 4 years to start Achieve Wealth with a partner. And yeah, I'll go back to way back. One of the things I've always wanted to be is a business owner. So back when I was 7 years old, I was on the sidelines selling freezies to people at soccer games, right? So I've always I've always wanted to start my own business. I just wasn't always sure what that would look like up until I got into the finance industry in general at age 19. I started at the credit union, and I kind of fell in love with finance at that time. I'm still a big advocate for the credit union. I think they do great work, and ended up though realizing that I wanted to have more autonomy than what I could get working in a more corporate style structure. So every move I've made over the past, I've been in the finance industry for the past 8 years, but I've been doing financial planning for the past 5. But every move I've made in the finance industry has been about creating more autonomy for my business, myself, and my clients. And so leaving there, going to a big wealth management firm to learn the ropes there was amazing. It was a really cool experience. And again, though there's a little bit too much corporate structure there. I'll get into that maybe in a bit, but Achieve Wealth was started out of a desire to be completely autonomous with what I could do with my clients, the products that I could provide for them, and the value that I could bring to them without having someone tell me which direction is the best way to go. So yeah, it was born out of just the desire for more autonomy. And that's been the story kind of my life over the past 8 years.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. You don't often see a lot of people that are, newer in the industry going off on their own like you did. So you mentioned that since you were little, you've always wanted to own your own business, type of thing. Was that part of the motivation, or is there other motivations there? Are you finding that as a business owner and having the autonomy, do you have more time for yourself, or do you find that you work a lot more than you would if you were working for the bank? Things like that.
Yeah.
How has it been? What have you learned since you opened your company?
Well, as you know, and as anyone who's ever been in a income volatile industry where you don't have a salary, there's ups and there's downs. I find that the difference between even being like where I was prior, I didn't have any salary or anything like that. I still had to make my own way, but the ups and downs are a lot bigger when you own your own place, right? It seems like the emotional and financial roller coaster of owning a business is pretty intense, I would say. And that was probably the biggest difference. You put more at stake, so there's more to risk, and the successes are a lot cooler and a lot higher, but the downs are also a lot lower. I'm sure you have a few stories on that, I imagine, too, with Platinum. So it's just, I think the nature of just being a business owner in general is that you need to understand the risks of what you're getting into, but also understand that it has been a lot more work to do my own thing. It still allows me the ability on a Thursday evening, if I have to go home and we've got plans, or Monday morning, if we want to do something, then we can go ahead and do that It just means I might be working all day Saturday. And I love that ability to control my schedule like that. I wouldn't give it up. I've often made the joke that I think I'm unhireable now because I just hate like set hours so much. So yeah, it's been a lot of work. The ups are higher, the downs are a little bit lower, but I love the autonomy. It's the best part.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And you know, like you said, like every business has its own challenges, right? And just knowing and understanding the business that you're in so that you can find ways to kind of mitigate those challenges. It's also a huge thing. It's also part of, you know, part of what we do as business owners and things like that, right? So, I mean, there's so many people out there, you know, leading up to these podcasts here. You know, I asked a bunch of people, do you have a financial planner? Do you have a financial planner? Most people tend to say no.
Yeah.
Why is that? And what is the benefit to people in general to have a financial planner, and also even for entrepreneurs to have a financial planner?
There's a big misunderstanding or lack of understanding, I think, about what financial planners do for their clients, because historically what we've always done has now changed. Mm-hmm. So historically what we've done is financial planners have largely been investment advisors for clients, where we'll sit down with them and we'll pick out the mutual funds we think are going to perform the best, and we'll tell them to leave their portfolios and we'll meet you on the other side of retirement. But over the past 30 years, a lot of new data has come to light that that's not the best way for financial planners to work with their clients. Passive index funds have largely replaced the need for financial planners to try to find that winning manager. And now financial planners and financial advisors have to come up with a value proposition outside of being able to read the markets and predict the best investments, because history has proven that it's almost impossible to do with any consistency anyways. Mm-hmm. So I think that new wave of financial planners, and I think we see it in a lot of industries where the top 20% do 80% of the business. It's the same in our industry. And so what we're finding is that the people who can clearly communicate their value proposition and understand and provide people like with reasons to actually do business with them are the ones that are going to find those clients. And so now that, in my opinion, we've taken away a lot of the need for financial planners to be investment managers, what else is there for people that want to actually do business with us? And there's a lot of research on this. And in fact, there's 5 different areas that actually allow people to, or that financial advisors should put themselves in front of in terms of value proposition, so that we can actually communicate what we do with our clients. And those 5 areas are asset allocation, which is basically like, where are we going to put your money and why? A withdrawal strategy in retirement. So where should we take your money out of and how much should we take out? There's something called the 4% rule in our world. So it's like, we need to make sure that you can live off of 4% of your total net worth or total investments as retirement income. There's been a lot of debate about that, but that's kind of the industry standard, is the 4% rule. There's guaranteed income products, and you touched on business owners. I specialize in working with business owners. I really love that space because there's so much to do. But most business owners don't have pension plans unless they are a big enough business that they've set up some sort of pension plan for themselves. Most of them don't pay into CPP, right? So there's another level of guaranteed income that is off the table. Now, they can pay into CPP. A lot of them don't for tax reasons. So it's about, a guaranteed income strategy is the third one, and then tax efficient allocation. So it's like, how should you be investing your money from a tax perspective? And that's more than RRSPs and tax-free savings accounts, because then we get into, especially if you're a business owner, should you be investing within your corporation, or should you be taking money out of your corporation to invest personally? And if you do, what are the best types of investments to use in the context of tax efficiency? So should we focus on capital growth? Should we focus on real estate that generates us rental income as well as capital appreciation? Should we figure out like how do we best approach it from a tax perspective? And then the last one is portfolio optimization. And so those 5 areas are really where financial planners need to communicate with their clients that they actually and how I feel that I try to communicate with my clients. This is where I do work for you outside of trying to pick the best funds, because that job has largely been replaced by just the ability to own passive index funds and get better returns than what you could do with active mutual funds.
All right. So that sounds interesting, because I mean, like you said, a lot of business owners, they don't have pension plans. They don't a lot pay themselves in dividends and not regular salaries. So they don't pay EI, they don't pay CPP, things like that, right? Um, so I mean, what type of advice would you have for business owners? Should we be, taking out that salary so we can contribute into CPP, or should we be doing something different with that money?
So a lot of the advice around that needs to be in conjunction with you, or conjunction with your accountant as well. But at the end of the day, there's benefits to both, but there has to be a plan behind it. I've worked with business owners who, let's say they make $120,000 a year, and they've taken it all out as salary for no other reason than that's just what someone told them to do 10 years ago, and they've continued to do that. But 10 years ago, they were maybe only making $45,000 from their business, and now they're making 120. So now we've got to look at tax brackets, right? So in lots of cases, it's beneficial to max out your salary in the context of your pensionable earnings. So you can take out $55,000, it's about $63,000 now in salary, and max out your CPP contributions. So what that does is it starts to give you that base level of guaranteed income in retirement. So you take about $63,000 out in salary, that maxes out your CPP contributions. And then the rest you take out in dividends. Now, then there's the question of how much do I actually need to live on, right? So if you only need $70,000 of taxable income, which let's say results in about $50,000 of after-tax income, take out that first 63 in salary, take out that next 7 in dividends. And then if you're still having retained earnings in your corporation, so profits in excess of all of your expenses that you could take out as salary, consider investing that within your corporation, because that way, especially right now in Saskatchewan, Tim, we have a 0% provincial, federal or provincial tax rate for small business owners making under the small business deduction, which is like $550,000 of income. So if you make less than $550,000 in income, you're only getting taxed at 9%. That's it. Okay. So taking that money out of your corporation actually introduces it into a whole nother personal tax bracket. So then all of a sudden you're taking it out and you're getting taxed at like 25% or 32%, depending on where you're at in tax brackets. Whereas if you left it in, you would only be getting taxed at 9%. And you can take that money and either invest it within the corporation that you currently use for your day-to-day, or you can set up something called a holding company, where you can transfer on a intercompany dividend. So you don't actually have any taxes. You can transfer to your holding company and invest there instead of having to actually take it out as personal income. So we do that strategy with a lot of people. It's tax efficient because we have them only take out as much as needed in salary. We take out the rest in dividends so that they can still meet their lifestyle expenses. And then anything in excess of that, especially for business owners who don't have like pension plans, we want to make sure we're deferring the tax liability to down the road, because deferred tax is better. And that's a rule of thumb. If you can defer paying tax till a later time, then you're probably going to pay less in terms of actual dollars towards taxes. So that's some strategies that we use for business owners.
All right. No, that makes sense. And I guess the other thing that we could possibly mention is that, like, for people like business owners that do full dividends, no salary type of thing, right? They're not getting any type of RSP contribution limits either. Is that correct?
Right. So dividends don't generate any RRSP room. So basically, if you, let's say, started a business after 10 years of working a job, it still may be a good idea to take, you've generated RSP room for those 10 years you've worked at as a job. So unless you've maxed it out during those times, you still do have RSP room. It could be a good idea to take out dividends and then put it into your RSP, but it doesn't always make sense. And that's where we come in, right? That's where we kind of go forward and say, well, what are your goals? When do you want to retire? What are you going to do with your business when you retire? Where's your taxable income sources coming from? Because when you put money into an RRSP, you create a taxable income source. You get a tax deduction for the year, but it's not always beneficial to put money into an RRSP, especially as business owners. So we have to like make sure that we're managing where your money's coming from in the context of taxable income flows, because we don't want to create too many taxable income flows for business owners in retirement. We want to create a little bit more of the tax-free or tax-preferred income streams, and that's kind of what we do when determining where you should put your money, if it's in RSPs or if it's in corporate investments or if it's in TFSAs or something like that.
All right. No, that makes sense. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So then in general, the world has gone through a pandemic and I guess still going through it. Yesterday I was at Regina Beach yesterday and you wouldn't know that there's a pandemic. So it seems like we're coming out on the other side of it now.
Yeah.
What would you say, from your perspective, what would you say is what's the market doing right now? Is the market going up? Is it the best time to invest right now? Or is the market going to continue going down and you wait a little bit and then invest later? Like, what would you say is kind of like the opportunities that are out there right now for investing?
So it's a really good question, and it's probably like my most frequently asked question. And the long and short answer are fairly similar, because one thing that we've proven to be really, really bad at is predicting what the market's going to do. Because essentially it's too big of a machine to understand every single factor that influences it. And just by understanding, let's say we could understand the factors that influence it and we could predict what it was going to do, that in and of itself would cause it to do something different. And so it's one of those things where all we can do is look at fundamental ways of valuing the market right now. And there's always the concern that it's a little overpriced, right? That the growth companies like the FANG stocks, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google make up too much of the market, right? And what happens if there's a correction there? Now, there's always that concern. The problem is that we don't necessarily know everything that could influence the market going forward. So for instance, before COVID, we didn't know that the market was going to drop 33% in the span of 2 months, right? Like it's the biggest single drop in recorded market history in that short of a time span. So there's the idea that markets are overpriced. For me, what I see is trying to time it is going to get you in more trouble than anything else, because yes, there's risk in investing and there's risk of a correction, but there's also risk with your money sitting on the sidelines. And how we make sure we handle that risk is through diversification. So we're not only exposed to the potentially overpriced or what some people view as overpriced sectors of the economy, like growth companies like the Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. We're also exposed to the small companies that historically, after corrections, have outperformed large companies. So we're also offering investors exposure there. Investors should be exposed to small cap and what we call value companies. Value companies just mean that it's kind of like you're getting something on discount, right? The value of it is less than what it should be. So we do that by passive exposure to those areas. And again, historically, value has done very, very well in times after recessions, times after economic corrections, things like that. Does that answer your question? I know it was kind of long-winded, but does that answer it?
Well, I mean, so in the short version of it, market went down, but it's doing better than it was. But if you diversify your portfolio, you can manage the risk of the up and downs of the market. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And diversification, it's like people sometimes misunderstand diversification. They think it's just buying a bunch of different investments, but there's also correlation you have to think of with diversification as well. Like if you buy a bunch of different investments that all do the same thing, when let's say a correction or shortage of supplies hits that one side of the market that you're invested in, then it's like okay, you're not actually diversified. You may be in a bunch of different companies, but if they're all correlated with each other, meaning they move the same direction depending on different market conditions, you're not diversified. So there's ways to diversify properly, and there's ways to diversify improperly, which is why it's so hard to diversify with owning a stock portfolio, because you have to have so much money in order to properly buy like the right amount of stocks to diversify. And so it's difficult to own a stock portfolio. You're often concentrated in too high risk areas, or maybe not enough risk. It's just it's an interesting discussion to have, though.
Okay, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. You know, there's been a influx of people nowadays promoting buying stocks, whether it's the forex market. I see it on my Facebook all the time. It seems like the forex market has become almost like a network marketing type business. Yeah. Are you seeing that in your world too? And what are some of the comments that you can maybe give on stuff like that?
So when you're looking at getting financial advice and trends from the internet, you have to be very, very careful of who you're getting your advice from. Even when it's from reputable sources like Business News Network or Yahoo Finance or places like that. Yes, it is a trend. It's become one of those things where you see kind of like your friend who was who, I don't know, was a manager somewhere at a sporting goods store, and all of a sudden now is a crypto expert, right? Mm-hmm. And you kind of like look at that and you're saying, well, I don't know if I would actually trust that person. Maybe he's a great guy, but I don't know if I would trust that person to offer me financial advice. So it's where your due diligence comes in to make sure that you're actually taking advice from people who are able to offer advice through licensing and have liability to offer. So for instance, if I give someone really bad financial advice and I tell them to put all their money in one single area of the market, they do, and they lose it all, I have a lot of liability to answer for there. So it's in my best interest to make sure my clients are properly diversified. It's in my best interest. Well, and it's also, I have a fiduciary duty as a certified financial planner to offer my clients good advice. No one else, unless you have those designations and offer and answer to a licensing body and have regulations, you can say whatever you want to say and you have no liability attached to it. And if you ruin someone else's life because someone trusts you, whoops, at least I made my $1,000 for selling my course to them, you know, and that's a dangerous game we're playing. And I think that I think there's a bubble there. I think that's going to burst at some point where all of a sudden there may be liability attached to giving advice out online. So if you're in that space of giving the advice, you have to be very, very careful, but don't just blindly take advice on things that you may not know are coming from a reputable source. Is my kind of 2 cents on that.
All right. Oh, thank you. Thank you for those comments. You know, just from, you know, my online research that I've been doing, it seems that the tech space is kind of taking over right now when it comes to, you know, the stocks that are starting to perform well, but still low enough type of thing. In your professional opinion, what type of industries are you seeing that are kind of doing really well right now when it comes to growth and from a stock market perspective?
Yeah. Well, did you hear the announcement yesterday from Canada that they're going to ban gas-powered vehicles, like the new sale of gas-powered vehicles in 2035?
You know what? I did not, because I spent all day at the beach yesterday. So
there you go.
I kind of shut everything off yesterday.
Nice.
I did not. But, you know, while I was at the beach, somebody was talking to me about something similar to this. And they were saying that, you know, electric vehicles like Tesla and things like that. I kind of overheard them talking. They're like, you got to start investing in things like that, or invest in the companies that make the batteries for them or makes the technology for them, because they are going to be the new norm in the future type of thing. Yeah, you know, that announcement that you're talking about, even though I don't know about it, sounds very familiar to some I actually heard yesterday.
Right. So the logic would say, we're moving towards an all EV future with electric vehicles, right? And so therefore that makes them a logical place to put your money, right? The problem with that is I'm going to take way back to when the airline industry was just getting started, and it was starting to get like become a commercial industry, and you can invest in these companies. The idea is that airlines is this huge new innovations. Everyone's going to travel by air now. We're all going to be doing this, and it should, in theory, be a great investment, right? And it's the same logic applied right now to the electric vehicle industry. Now, there's a gentleman out of University of Southern California named Brad Cornell, and Brad Cornell says he believes that there's a little bit of a market delusion in the electric vehicle space. Not because he doesn't believe in electric vehicles, but simply because he understands that just because it's the way technology is moving does not mean that we'll be able to know which investment is the right one. Now, people automatically think Tesla when they think of electric vehicles. And that goes back to your original question too, of what companies are doing really well right now. Now, Tesla's had its up and downs this year. And I'm not giving advice as to whether or not you should buy Tesla, but Tesla's market value is way out of proportion with its earnings. And it's also way out of proportion with how it could possibly do any better over the next 10 years. Like he was talking about Tesla in his paper, and he said that with their current share price, they would have to have the output capacity of Toyota with the profit margins of Ferrari. So Toyota, it's the largest output manufacturer of cars in the world, and Ferrari has the highest profit margins. For Tesla to justify its share price right now, it would have to be in that space. And now that's almost impossible to conceive of, especially in the next few years. So when we think about which companies will do well, and back to the airline example, when they started the airlines, it should have been a good investment, but it wasn't. And Warren Buffett said if the capitalist was present at Kitty Hawk, he would have shot down the plane and saved his money. Because at the end of the day, like it should have been a good investment, but it wasn't, and we just didn't know which companies were right. And so I think it could be, I'm not saying it will be, but it could be the same thing with electric vehicles, where we just aren't sure. It could be a traditional auto manufacturer like Volkswagen that comes out with the ability to produce the best cars and the best batteries at the most environmentally friendly way, because also batteries right now are not very environmentally friendly for these electric vehicles. Yeah. So it could be that, or it could be Tesla, or it could be a company that hasn't even been created yet that comes out with the best idea and the best ability to manufacture these cars. It just is difficult to predict right now, though, which one will be that company.
That's true. I mean, with an announcement like that, you're going to have everybody that's got the capacity to enter that space wanting to enter that space, right? Exactly. And create something that's going to be amazing for people. So maybe let's circle back a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about entrepreneurship for you here. You started this company back in September. What are some of the obstacles that you've faced? How did you navigate through the pandemic? Because I mean, you started this right smack in the middle of the pandemic. So how did you navigate it? What are some of the obstacles that you're facing, and how do you overcome those obstacles? Okay, I think we can't hear you.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I had to fix my computer. Yeah, so the obstacles and everything, it's been an interesting and trying year. Some of the big obstacles are people being nervous about dealing with a small firm, because what if they lose all their money, right? That's been a common thing that I've heard, and it doesn't quite work like that. So if someone does invest with me, their money isn't with Achieve Wealth Management. Their money is with our dealership that we work with, that we partnered with, who then provides all the necessary investments and contracts with the investing party. So the money's always with the fund company, not with the actual firm. So there's been, and we've heard some of that from people who are trying to get people not to do business with me. Oh, what if they go out of business? What if all of this happens? We've definitely been, we've had our fair share of that. So providing a deeper level of understanding about our industry to people has been really key. And
it's a lot more work than I initially thought it was going to be. I guess that's another obstacle. Because we're now doing every part of our business, the compliance part, the like the suitability part, like we're doing all the administrative part and as well as the financial planning parts. We added like 2 more components into our business that we've never necessarily had to deal with before. So that's been a bit of a learning curve for us. But at the same time, again, when you ask for more responsibility and autonomy, you get it, right? And it also comes with the added tasks of having to just work harder and work more and build what you want to build, because now everything's in my control. Whereas outside of market conditions, everything's in my control. So I love that because I'm now responsible for whether or not my business succeeds or fails. And that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's true of a lot of businesses, right? Because even in the real estate world as well, you've got the big brokerages and you've got the smaller brokerages, and we often hear the same thing out here that, like you got to work with the bigger brokerages because they're bigger. But no, it's all about who you are, right? And it's all about the value that you as an individual provide for people. And sometimes you and I, and many people in the business world, we make it look easy. Right. And people don't often know the work that goes behind it, right? I often say, hey, it's like a tree. You see this big tree that's out there, but the roots are often 2 or 3 times bigger than that tree, right? So people don't understand the amount of work that goes on in the background, but we try to make it look easy, and people think it's glamorous, but I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into owning a business, right? And a lot of people don't often understand that part of it. But I mean, at the end of the day, though, like you said, you've got the autonomy that you're looking for. There's still many benefits to it, right? There's a lot of benefits, and if you look at the cost benefit analysis, in my opinion, the benefits outweigh the cost, in my opinion. But that may not be for a lot of people, right?
Right. Yeah, that's so true. I love the analogy of the tree and the roots. Like that's really cool. And you're right. Like it definitely takes a special type of risk tolerance to be able to say, I'm going to throw away my guaranteed income potential that I have to do something that I've always wanted to do. But it's so cool, isn't it? Like to be able to even look back for 5 years, for 8 months for me, or 10 months for me, and however long you've owned your brokerage for too, right? Like how cool is it to look back now and say, like, we're not quite maybe where we want to be, but we've come such a long way. It's really cool. Yeah.
It's all about growth, right? Like, you set your goals and you try to meet those goals. And when you set those goals, when you meet them, you set another goal and you try to meet them, and you just keep going, right? Try to grow as much as possible, that percent, to maximize your growth potential, which is to me, that's amazing, because no one can really tell you that, hey, we're not going to promote you, right? Because we chose someone else, right? Because how well you do is in your hands, right? How well I do is in my hands, right? And that comes back to how we treat our clients, the goals that we set, the work that we put in. Because if we don't put in work, we don't eat. It's just what it is, right? That's how being a business owner works. So then, for you and for your family, like when you started this, was it kind of a nervous move for you and your wife, talking this through and try to figure if this was the best move for you?
Yeah, it was. We had been thinking about making a move for a while. And these conversations weren't something that I just woke up one day and said, oh, I want to leave. I want to do my own thing now. I think I'm ready. It was about a year's worth of really intense planning and discussions, because there's always the possibility that you fail at something like this. And if you fail at it, what does that look like, and what type of risk are you putting yourself in and your family in, and things like that. And so we had to have those discussions. I'm like super blessed though. Like my wife believes so much in what I'm doing, that the first time I made the move, when I left the credit union to go with the wealth management company. I was like part of their emerging leaders program. I was on fast track to management, and I was like super young. Like I was 21 years old, and I was doing really well in that company. I was topping my sales for my branch and all that stuff. And then I all of a sudden, I said to her, like, I don't like it here anymore. I think I can do better. I think I can do more. And she was in university at the time. So I left behind like $55,000 a year for me at the time, which was huge at 21, 55 grand a year. I'm like, that was amazing. I left that behind while she was in university full time, making no money, to basically say like this is our next step, and I want to take this risk because I believe in myself and I want to bet on myself. And she saw the success I then had over the next 4 years. So when the conversation did end up coming to, okay, let's take some more risk, let's start my own business, it wasn't any more a conversation of if we believed we could do it. It was, what does it logistically look like? What does this do for our 10-year plan? I mean, like we were saying, in 3 years, I want to buy a cottage. We want to buy a cottage. We just bought our house. We got a 3-year plan to buy a cottage, have kids. We get all this stuff. And all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? Maybe let's put some of those things on hold, because that was where the big conversations had to happen though. It wasn't as to we should or shouldn't do this. It was what things do we now need to put on hold, because we're going to take a step back so we can grow even further.
Yeah, like it's the sacrifices that you make, right? I was talking to a friend of mine. He now owns a bunch of restaurants. But I remember when he started that first restaurant, he sold his house, sold his car, sold everything, went and rented a house so he can pull all the capital to invest in what he truly believed in, right? And now he's a multimillionaire. Has his house is back, has his cars back, right? So yeah. I mean, it's that, it's that belief that you have in yourself that, you know what, I know I can do this. I'm willing to take the risk, and I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to go both feet in and go for it. And it's great to hear. And I mean, I'm hearing about your company and seeing you all over the place now. So I'm seeing the success that you're growing there in your company. So that's an amazing thing to watch. If you could say one thing to, and I always ask this of all my guests, if you can say one thing to somebody that is thinking of branching out and going into their own business, it doesn't even have to be financial, it can be anything. What is that 2 or 3 piece of advice that you would give? This is usually my last question that I always ask. So what is that piece of advice that you could give?
So my advice would be to take an educated risk. Don't take risk just for the sake of taking a risk. Make sure that the reason why you're doing what you're doing, make sure you have a reason as to why, and that you've looked at as much as you can, every part of it. That's from my own experience, and as well from just my research on taking risk in general. Taking risk is necessary in order to do something like what you've done or what I've done or what someone wants to do. But sometimes people are attracted to risk just for the sake of the thrill of it. If you do that, you're going to have a whole lot more difficult of a road to success. Take educated risks and know where that risk needs to be taken. And then my one, I wouldn't call it a regret, but one thing I would have done differently when I first started, like 6 years ago in this business, was I wish I had found someone who had done what I was looking to do and just learned from them. Just taking the time to sit down and learn everything about what I wanted to do, so that when I did take that step of going that next, of starting my own business, I would have just known so much more about about what I wanted to do. And I think that's really helpful. And whether it's a mentor or whether it's someone you work for, whatever that looks like, I think those two things is finding someone who's done it before that can show you the ropes, and then also taking those educated risks where necessary, but not taking risks just for the sake of it being risky. It is two things from my life that I've learned over the past 6 years.
Nope, that's amazing. When people, like, I often get people that will come to me that are looking to start a business, and we'll just kind of talk it out. And the one question that I always ask is your number one thoughts there, which is, what is your why? Yeah. Right? You gotta be able to answer that question. You gotta be able, because that question is what keeps you going, right? If you're able to define what your why is, that's really what keeps you going. Because like you said, if you're taking that risk just for the sake of taking risk, it's like going to the casino and just putting everything on black and hoping that you're gonna win, right? But if you truly know what your why is, that would help you kind of, determine the level of risk that you want to take, and also help you organize and plan a little bit better. So I definitely resonate with that.
Yeah, and also it helps you determine your own value. Like what are you doing that's different than the next person, and why should someone do business with you? And I'm sure you've read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. I think every entrepreneur, business owner that I've talked to has read that book, and I would encourage anyone who's looking to do it to read the book. But yeah, like you have to differentiate yourself in some capacity from everyone else, and so taking that risk, starting with why, and defining your value proposition is like crucial. Like that, those are the founding, like the base, like blocks of starting that business, or a successful business. Anyways, most businesses aren't successful when they start, right? Like it takes a lot, 2 to 3 years to be profitable. And most people go out of business in the first year and a half. Like,
for sure.
If you have those strong foundations though, Tim, right? Like you've got an MBA and you've also started your own business, or like you're much more qualified to speak on this than I am. But yeah, that's what I've seen as being successful in this world.
I agree. I agree with all that. I also think though that, like, also as you keep going, as you've defined why people should work with you, as you keep going and as you grow your business, sometimes you have to revisit those reasons, right?
Yeah.
So that you don't forget your core values. Because especially if you're in a business that is going in a rapid growth mode, right? You can completely forget your values, right? But if you're, like you said, if you're grounded and you kind of ground yourself back with those core values as to what your why is, you can truly build a business that you can be proud of. Because most people that build a business that they're not proud of, it's not because they wanted to do it. It's because that rapid growth hits and you're just kind of going in motion, right? You're just following. Instead of leading, you're following your business. Instead of leading your business, you're following it, right? So yeah, absolutely. Knowing your why and what your value propositions are crucial, absolutely crucial and important. It's been interesting. I know that you and I, we've been talking about doing this for quite some time now. I definitely have to apologize that it's taken us this long to get together and get you on the podcast here. I truly appreciate your time today. I know you've got a million things to do today, being the day after a holiday. So I'm not going to keep you too long. I just want to thank you again for coming on and sharing your insights and sharing your knowledge with my audience. I truly appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much. All right. So this episode would be the last one for the season. As usual, we're going to take a couple months off and we'll be back in January 2022. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody again and hearing from everybody, hearing your thoughts and comments on the different podcasts. Season 3 is coming out January 2022. Thank you, y'all. Take care.